Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Deploying Code with Confidence. This webinar event is brought to you in partnership with SolarWinds. Thank you so much for joining us on this event. We've got a really cool event lined up for you today with a live demo. So you're in a treat, you're in the right place if you want to learn how to better deploy code with confidence. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the event. First off, my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. We want this to be an educational event. I know that many of you have already discovered the questions box. It's there on the left-hand side of your audience console. Of course, we welcome all the good mornings and hellos and welcome messages from around the world. But we also want this to be an educational event. So I just called your attention to the questions box. If you haven't found it already or haven't used it before, we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event and doing our best to field questions during the event. So get your questions in early, and we'll be doing our best to answer every question that comes in. We also have a number of handouts available for download in the Handouts tab, starting off with the first one, which is the free SolarWinds DPM trial. It's there that you can try out the SolarWinds Database Performance Monitor that we'll be talking about on the event today for yourself for free. There are also 3 other PDFs that you can download: the guided demo, the Deploying Code with Confidence paper, and the qualified results sampler that you can download related to Database Performance Monitor. We'll be talking about all those handouts later in the event. And then finally, for those on the live event, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card giveaway at the end of the presentation today. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. You can find the legal prize terms and conditions in the Handouts tab. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenters. They are Mr. John Patokny, who is a sales engineer at SolarWinds, and Mr. Jared Hensel, who is a senior product marketing manager also at SolarWinds. John and Jared, it's great to have you both on. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Let's begin. A little bit about myself. My name is Jared Hensel. I was an IT pro for 15 plus years before joining SolarWinds. One of our database products was the last product I bought. I've worked with large organizations to MSPs. I'm on the database side, so I know the importance of getting out in front of problems, monitoring problems before they become problems, and really just, been there, done that, and trying to, I empathize with all the trials and tribulations you guys go through every day. Let John talk about himself real quick.
Yeah, a little background about me. I'm a sales engineer for the Database Performance Monitor team at SolarWinds, as well as a number of other products that we provide. Before that, I spent a number of years as an engineer working on developing the product as well, and spending a lot of time optimizing cloud services and databases.
Awesome. Now, real quick, a little bit about SolarWinds, because, hopefully some of you guys have heard of us before, but you may be like, hey, SolarWinds, yes, I've heard of them. They're the network monitoring company. That is no longer true. I mean, that is still true, but we are well beyond just network monitoring. Obviously, we're number 1 in the network monitoring space, but we're number 3 in systems monitoring. We've got over 60 plus products to help you with any and every problem you have, be it MSP and little toolkits to enterprise organizations. We've got a solution for you. And the product that John and I are going to talk about shortly is on the database side. So, here's how Gartner Gartner defines ITOM a certain way, and we kind of pivot on it. And this is pretty similar, where you've got your application side, you've got your database management, and then you've got your infrastructure side. But again, what we're going to focus is on the database side. Heavily, we see a large portion of it that obviously applications are dependent on the data. I mean, that is where all the, process transactions are processed, inventory is saved. So it's going and ensuring that that database is working well at all times, but also that, hey, an application is making rapid changes. You're getting pushed 20, 30 times a day, a couple times a week, whatever it may be. But once you push that application, are we getting the expected results in the database that we think we should be getting? Is it performing better? Is it performing worse? Is it performing the same? So again, results may vary. You may do a code push and it's going to take a hit on the database and you're expecting that, but you want to ensure that, hey, this is what I expected. This was within spec. This is normal. So what we're going to do is talk about how can you deploy code with confidence and ensure that when a code deployment is done, that the backend database is responding the way that you expect it to, or if it's not, how you can go troubleshooting problems. So, every time you deploy code, there's a risk. I mean, yes, people have dev test environments and they test them, but I still know when you push to production, you are still holding your breath, fingers are crossed, and going, I hope this works as expected. So where SolarWinds Database Performance Monitor comes in is gives you that visibility to see and understand how your code is affecting database performance. You're not having to jump between Mr. DBA, Mr. DevOps. You can get everybody in the same room, look at the same screen, and stop wasting time, stop wasting troubleshooting efforts. Just laser focus on, hey, this is what's changed, this was expected, this is not expected, things along those lines. So, some of the things we'll cover are, get instant view into query performance before and after code is pushed. View changes prior to in staging and ways you can look at it that way. Customizing your time range. Hey, I made a code change and I did it at midnight and I expected to see the worst hit 2 days later. Hey, Black Friday was just last week. Maybe code was deployed on Tuesday in anticipation of Black Friday, or maybe there was something pushed on Black Friday at noon because there was an issue at 8 a.m. So again, having that ability to customize your time frame to really see the pattern you're looking for, the metrics you're looking for, and kind of goes on with the last one of, sometimes you do code, you want to see code over a larger percent of time. I want to see what happened the last month or the last week or the last 6 months or whatever it is, that it may just not be a one and done code push. I want to see this over time. A little bit about Database Performance Monitor. It's a holistic view of open source database performance monitoring that really can be used by the entire team. There's little overhead, so you're not sitting there putting it on databases and hammering on them. You're able to pull in databases of different types. So again, if you've got a Mongo database group, a team or set of databases, and a MySQL or a Postgres, you can pull them all into a single tool. You're not having to use the native tools between those products and jumping between 3 or 4 of them. Visibility into the database workload and the query. You can get visibility on some of the infrastructure side. And then really with 1 second granularity, which is, we think is a key differentiator, that you're able to see those small blips. Like I can see exactly what happened at 12:01 or whatever time frame I want to go to. I'm not forced to look at, a 5-minute average, an average of an average, things along those lines. So really, when you're pushing code, you're doing it with a specific reason and intent, and you can zoom in to that time frame to exactly see what's going on. Again, this is a SaaS platform, so you're not having to provision any infrastructure on premises. A large number of our customers are cloud native. We do have some that are on premises still, but if you're cloud native, then this goes straight along the lines. You don't have to contact Dell or provision a VM or anything like that. You can see the database health. So you're just not you're able to look beyond just the queries. I can get some health information, which may let you opt up. I made a code change. I expect CPU to drop because I need to save some EC2 money and change my instance size, things along those lines. As I mentioned a little bit before, the before and after time frame, I can completely compare queries and go, I expected this. This is what I expected. Great, it worked. I didn't expect this. This now jumped through the roof. This query was performing quite nicely 2 hours ago, and now it's going crazy. Now I need to drill into it. You can see your historical trends, see it over time. again, obviously you can be alerted. Again, if you want to take a more of a hands-off approach, hey, something happened. I now want to be alerted. I'm not in the tool all the time. Obviously, you've got customizable dashboards for your needs. And since this is a cloud product, we want you to know that your data is protected and we are GDPR and SOC 2 compliant. Um, you know, other use cases besides just kind of the code deploy, how are people using this? Obviously, there are ad hoc troubleshooting. You could deploy a code and it looks great, and you move on, and a couple hours later, something crazy happens. It's IT, stuff breaks. It's just bound to happen. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So again, being able to quickly reduce your MTTR, mean time to resolution to resolve, quickly get in there, find where the problem is, and start tuning things or alerting the other teams accordingly. That's definitely going to save your bacon. And really looking and monitoring over time, assuring that, hey, this is the growth my company expected, or hey, why am I seeing this weird spike every Tuesday at 10 o'clock? Like, why is this always happening? Okay, one time's a freak every week. Okay, hey, that is something occurring that you should drill into. And then again, getting all your teams in there. We have everybody from system admins to developers to DBAs, all are in the product using it. So, John, personally, what is your biggest pain point if you had to manage a database?
Oh, let's see. I think for me, it's definitely team disruptions, making sure that the team is able to focus on developing new features and making sure that we are meeting the needs of our customers and not fighting fires.
See,
So
I think,
it's kind of a
yeah.
combination of all of them, really, when you think about it. But
Well, and you come from the developer world that you pointed out earlier, where I'm more probably the timing issue coming from a systems point of view is like, I don't want to be in there. I just want to know before somebody complains.
yeah.
So awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to fill this out. Um, Keep going on. So, what databases are we monitoring? They're open source. So again, MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, Aurora, Vitesse, Redis. So again, these can be on premises. These can be in the cloud. They can be anywhere in between. Again, so we can grab that data and pull that back, but it is the open source realm. These are people that tend to be using Amazon, AWS, or cloud native. But again, there are plenty of organizations that are shifting from Oracle to my Postgres, anything along those lines, or another reason you have your database on premises. We can totally do that. Again, a couple quotes that we have from customers. I mean, you could see the list of some of the customers down there. Obviously, one of them literally was code deploy. Of the instant that code deploy changed, we can confirm exactly what we anticipated would happen. Again, the other use cases, find out what we didn't anticipate. Again, these are real world people giving us their feedback on how they're in the product, anything along those lines. No, it's great to hear this type of feedback. And honestly, customers, we've got everybody from Cisco. I mean, we have all heard of them, to your Yelps, your DraftKings, completely different use cases from Cisco and DraftKings and Etsy. I know I was watching them on Black Friday. Etsy had a cool dashboard showing you all the transactions, and Shopify did, and all the processes that they were doing. So that was really slick. And knowing that behind the scenes, DPM was ensuring that database was running correctly and transactions were being processed correctly. So with that said, I've probably taken up more than enough time, and so I'd like to kick this over to John to start the demo.
Yeah, let's do it. I will share my demo application window, and we can start diving into what this looks like in practice. All right. So hopefully everyone who's watching can see my screen here. I've got Database Performance Monitor pulled up. This is just a demo account of mine. It's got a mixture of MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, and I think a Redis instance as well. And just to kind of get everyone acquainted with the platform, because I'm sure this is the first time quite a number of people are seeing this, what we're looking at right now is a view of database traffic across all the instances that I'm monitoring in my account. So the view that I'm on is what we call the profiler. And currently, I am viewing the top 20 most time-consuming queries I have run in recent history. I've got just the last hour of activity here. And this is showing me across not just a particular database instance, but all of them that we're monitoring in this account, what queries are spending the most time running. So when I look at my top query here, 24.28% of total time, this is across all 51 of the hosts I'm currently monitoring. What we're seeing here. It could be running against all of them. It could be that this is traffic from one database in particular that is taking up the vast majority of time that we're running queries in my workload. And we want to get a sense of what its behavior looks like. The spark line here shows me I've got kind of a spiky pattern here for my top query. Down below, others look like they're a lot more consistent or more periodic spikes. And we can also see details about how this query is behaving in general. So how many times does it run? Is it a very frequent query that is pretty cheap to execute? Or is it actually one of those big slow statements that is really expensive every time I run it? And DPM will capture all the queries that run against your database instance. So if you have a workload that is generally fairly well optimized, most of your queries are running quite quickly, you can still see exactly what is causing the load that is happening on your databases and understand where there's going to be the biggest opportunity for improvement across your systems. So there's a few things that we can do within DPM to help specifically with the idea of deploying code with confidence. First thing that I'm going to do here is show how you can overlay events in the platform. So when you do make a new change to your systems, whether it be an application deployment, or if you change something about the database or the infrastructure itself, we can see when that happened and diagnose what was going on around the time when the change occurred. So in the top right-hand corner here, I've got a little button that'll let me overlay change markers. These can be anything that you want. There's an API that'll let you generate these very simply. So I've got an app deployment event that I send from my deployment pipeline, for example. And we'll also capture events out of the box, things like database configuration changes that are happening, or high swap activity on a server, or general stalls that are happening in the database workload. But you can see that turning that on shows me a dashed line here. Right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we had a new deployment of my application. So if I want to understand what changed in the workload, what the impact on performance is for this application change, all I have to do is I can click and drag and zoom in on the time when that deployment happened. And now let's compare against historical performance. There's a compare time ranges drop down at the top here that will pick a reference interval. I'm just going to do 1 hour in the past. And now this is going to show me for each of my top queries what behavior looks like right around the time my deployment happened. And then underneath in gray, we can see exactly 1 hour before for the same size time range. And this will show me exactly what performance looks like before versus after. I can see how many times a query ran an hour ago compared to my current interval. I can see what the latency looks like. I can see what the delta is. So this change column is showing me that my top query is spending just shy of 4% more time running after my deployment compared to prior. So it's easy for me to see if there's been a big shift in behavior anywhere in my workload. And what I'll go ahead and do here is I can click, and we'll sort and see which queries have changed the most. And I see there is one query that's got a big relative shift in behavior. So if we want to take a look and see what's going on here, I can just click in and go to the details page and see where this query is being run from and what its performance looks like. And that's going to show me the normalized version of this query. So you can see at the top what we're doing here. This is a select statement. It looks like there's a sub-select in here. And down below, I have access to all the metrics that we capture about this query's performance. Things like time count, latency, any errors that we're seeing being returned back to the client, any information that we can capture based on its behavior, such as, is this query using an index? Are we seeing full table scans as part of its execution? Things like that are all tracked as metrics within DPM. And in addition, you can see there's a couple dots that are on this graph at the top. If I click on one of these dots, I can see a sample of this query. And that'll show me details about the connection that ran the statement. So get a sense of what user is running this query against my database, which logical database on the instance I'm looking at, where it came from in my data center, and how long this particular execution took to run. And for explainable queries like the select statement, we'll also have the explain plan available. So I've got the raw JSON of the explain that came against this MySQL database, or I can see a basic tabular format. It's just going to summarize the access types, number of rows being examined, things like that. And so I can see here, we've got type equals all. We're doing a full table scan as part of this execution. Uh, and in this sense, it's easy for me to see if there's been a big shift in my workload. I made a change to my application, and this query sees a lot more activity compared to an hour ago. If I am the developer that made this change, I want to go ahead and take a look and see if this is something I would have expected. If this is unexpected behavior, I should probably revert my change and make sure that it wasn't related to what I'm seeing here. So easy way for me to quickly get confidence that what I've done is not causing an adverse impact on the database. If we go back up to the profile here, I want to note that there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. So if you're interested in not just how much time a query is taking to run, we can also rank by different dimensions here. If I expand my dropdown, we've got a number of different dimensions we capture across the databases we support that we can rank and sort and compare performance for. So for example, let's look at which queries are running the most frequently in my system, and we can compare before and after there as well. So easy to understand. Is there a big increase in activity on the system? Are we seeing queries get slower? Are queries examining more rows than they were previously? Are we seeing a lot more table scans happening than there was before a change was made? All these types of questions are just a couple clicks away. Now, that's one aspect of the things that we can do within DPM to understand the performance after we make changes. Not everything that we do, though, is going to be affecting the top couple queries here. And so if we want to understand not just has there been a major shift in performance, but also has anything been introduced that is potentially problematic, we've got ways to do that as well. So separate from my profile here, where I can rank and sort my workload, there's also a page for search that'll let me look for queries that are new in the system. There's some filters at the top of this page that I can use to leverage and see particular parts of the workload that I'm interested in. In particular, I can filter based on query text. So if I'm working on a new feature, for example, and I just want to see the queries that are related to a particular table, I can type in a table name. I'm just going to pick on this guest book table that I see at the top. I just type guest book. Then we can see every query that's run against the guest book table. And we can filter that even further. So let's use my drop down here and look for just those queries that are missing indexes. We'll find all the full table scans that have run against the guest book table. We get a bit of a shorter list here. On top of that, we can go one step further and filter this down and look for queries that are new. So only ones that have been seen by DPM for the first time in the time frame that I'm looking at. So we just started seeing traffic for this statement. Here's a new query that ran against the guestbook table that's missing an index. And you can see the dashed line from my change marker. It lines right up with my application deployment. So again, if I'm working on developing a new feature, if I've just released this change, I want to take a look and make sure that this query is going to perform acceptably in my production environment. You can do this in your staging environment as you're doing live development. Make sure that what is being introduced is getting the proper view. In particular, if you use tools like an ORM to automatically generate queries, this can be hugely useful to make sure you're not missing any potential scalability problems when you go into production. It's also very helpful as another check when you're going to prod to make sure that there aren't potential problems working beneath the surface. Even if we do testing in our dev and stage environments, if our data set isn't big enough, then this could look just fine and escape notice. But then we go into production, and maybe a week later, as people start using your new feature more often, we start seeing a lot more load. And at that point, it becomes a much harder problem to diagnose. But we can see it as soon as we introduce the query in this way using DPM. And so just a quick review after we make these kinds of changes, we'll make sure that we don't have these types of time bombs lurking beneath the surface for us. I might do a quick check on time here. How much time do I have left, Jared?
Oh, you got plenty of time.
Perfect.
We're 26 minutes in, and I thought I went long. So yeah, you've got plenty of time.
Okay, excellent. In that case, yeah. So we've covered being able to see big changes in the workload and identifying queries that are being introduced for the first time. So those are really kind of central to understanding application code deployments in particular. But there's a lot of changes that we can make that are going to introduce problems that could be unrelated to our code itself. Say you're making configuration changes, or if you're upgrading your database to a new version, or changing the underlying hardware. And so when we go and look at DPM, we're able to cover those types of changes as well. One thing I like to highlight that's related to that as well is our best practices page. We'll take a look at the configuration of your systems. So if you're doing configuration changes, you can make sure that they conform to best practices for whatever database technology you're using. You can see I've got a list here for my MongoDB, my MySQL, my Postgres systems that I'm monitoring here. And this is going to look at the configuration of the system, so making sure that I've configured my database effectively for production, as well as the queries that are running the system itself. So are my queries doing anything that is kind of in violation of best practices? And so if I use this page as kind of a quick check, we can also get some extra eyes on the workload, right? We've got the tool doing analysis for us to see if there's anything that looks like it might need some more attention. As an example, here's a basic rule for, here are select statements against my Postgres server that is not using a where group or limit clause. And so we're going to have to pull back all the rows in the table that we're querying. I can see a list of all these queries here. Jump in, take a look at their details, just like we could from the profile or the queries page. And if I decide that this query is fine, maybe the table that I'm reading from is very small, it's not going to grow, I can go and mute that rule and say, just dismiss this from my view. And this becomes kind of like a static analysis page for your system, making sure that both the configuration and the workload that we're looking at is been investigated, that it's in accordance with best practices. And in cases where it isn't, somebody's made the call and said, this is still the best way to do things for our system. So those are three kind of high-level areas that we've covered pretty quickly for making sure that when we're making changes to either our applications or to the database itself, we've got a checklist that we can go through to make sure that our data layer is behaving as expected. Now, I'll jump back over to the profiler and note a couple of quick things. As we've been going through this, I'm looking at my entire data center by default, so all 51 of 51 hosts. If you know what databases are going to be affected by a change, you can also very easily filter down and make sure you're looking at just the ones that are relevant. And that way, if you've got a shared infrastructure, right, there's many teams that are interacting with many different systems, you're just looking at the ones that are relevant to the changes you're making. So the host filter at the top, let me pick individual instances that I'm interested in. I can just click on a server and add it to my filter, or I can use all or part of its hostname. For example, if I type API, it'll match all the servers that have API in the name. We can also filter by database type, or tag servers with labels and use those as filters too. So what region in my data center they belong to, or what applications are interacting with them. This guestbook tag is related to the guestbook table that we saw earlier. So easy for me to logically partition my system and make sure I'm looking at just what I care about. We can also do the same thing on the profiler page, though, just by looking at the query workload. If I expand that filter again, there's a section here for filtering by tags. And if I go back over to a query here, you may have noticed that these tags are bits of metadata that are attached to the queries that we're looking at. So here's a MongoDB query, and I can see things like the database that we're running against, the user that's running this query, which IP addresses it's coming from. And we can use those tags as filters to just see, say, all the queries that are associated with the user equals vidcortex, for example. So if we see anything that's got that tag associated with it, that's in my top 20 queries by number of executions, that's what we'll have show up here. And that gives me another way to filter my workload without having to know exactly which database I care about. You can do things like pick the user associated with the application that is connecting to the database that you've just changed and see only the queries that have been run by that application. Or embed comments in the queries that you're running themselves and use that as a way to also filter in a custom way. So we want to split up the workload and make sure that it's easy for us to find the queries that we care about when we're making changes. There's tools within the platform to make sure that no matter how complex your data layer is, we're narrowing the scope of what we're looking at and only viewing changes for the stuff that's just been changed by you, the developer. I want to leave some time for questions at the end because I think I saw a good number of them coming in. But as kind of a closing thought, if you are interested in this kind of product and making sure that you've got checks like this in place in your development process, one thing that DPM has available within it is the ability to encode these things into notebooks. So this is a markdown document that lets me create things like runbooks or investigation guides for the data that is related to my databases. And we've got some templates that are pre-baked into the product to help you get started. In particular, there are things like inspection guides to evaluate the health of your MySQL, MongoDB, or Postgres database. We also have a post-deployment runbook that you can use, and that'll walk through pretty much the exact same things that I've touched on during the webcast today. So being able to compare before versus after, identifying new queries that are coming in, and also looking at things like high-level metrics for the database, making sure that the resource consumption, that the rate of queries being executed, and the latency of the workload has not significantly changed. And so there's instructions built into the platform that you can leverage to make it easy to roll this out to your entire team. And that way, we get everyone kind of on the same page, contributing to making sure that when we make changes that affect the database, there are eyes on them, they're being reviewed, and that there isn't anything unexpected that's kind of sneaking past the team.
Hey, John, I know you showed and you had one with a chart in there, and those charts are live. So correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah. So I
absolutely.
mean, it's great that you have this, and you literally could be like, "Hey, ensure that this is not over X." Like, so you're not even having to, if where you've got a multiple team members logging in, they're not even having to drill around in the product. If you've got the run book and the checklist saying, hey, step one, check this is below 5. Step two, check this is below 200, or whatever it is per your environment, that they've not only got the run list of things to check, but they don't even have to go deep in the product to go find this. Because I know I've seen this significantly where you've got this, hey, okay, here are the 5 things we need to check. And if you know what you're doing, you can check those 5 things in 5 minutes. If you don't know what you're doing, it takes an hour to wade, through all the data or go to the right chart and figure out, okay, hey, yep, this is good, but it took me an hour to check these things off.
Yep. Yeah. Since this is just a markdown document, you can embed links to other places in the app. One thing that I can do as well is generate a static link to a page I'm looking at with the time frame frozen or set relatively based on, just show me the last hour of data.
Yeah. I mean, and I really like though that, where we're talking about code. I mean, I know there's, at least in this example, our demo example, we've got your golden signal charts. We obviously SolarWinds has an APM solution as well. And a lot of their, metrics of performance are using, Google's golden signals of what is it? Throughput, concurrency. I'm drawing a blank on what the other two are.
Latency and error.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got those charts in the product as well. Obviously, if you want to, hey, again, get more people on the same team, this is speaking language, at least high level language across development teams. Hey, this, you made a code change, and let's see what we see on the latency. This is more a universal language that other team members can understand. Just like, coming from the sysadmin days, hey, what was your compute? What was your memory? What was your storage? Okay, hey, that cut across everybody. That was a universal language. This is more of the web's, webby DevOps type of language.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important
Awesome.
to touch on as well, since you mentioned, a lot of folks here probably already have an APM tool. The reason why it's important to look at the database layer particularly is because those APM tools that you might be using to do this type of thing today, they focus specifically on the application. And that, kind of an obvious statement to make, but there's a lot of times where you can make a change to the system, right? And the application performance looks fine. It doesn't seem to have changed significantly. We're not going to see a spike in 90th percentile latency for your system, but it could have introduced a problem at the database level. And there's also, some of the things we looked at, like being able to identify new queries. There's no tooling to help you identify those types of things within your APM tools. And that's where we get into the kind of really insidious issues where everything looks fine, and then, several days later, all of a sudden we've got a problem on our hands. And there's a simple check that we could have done that will take, just a couple minutes. But we got to have the tooling in place. We've got to have people that are putting eyes on it to make sure that those problems are actually getting caught when they're introduced. The longer it takes for symptoms to show up, though, the harder it is to trace back to, hey, this deploy we did a week ago, and by the way, there's been 100 since then. It introduced an issue.
No, absolutely. In my prior life, working with an MSP, one of my clients was an e-com store, and we would always monitor it from the e-com point of view. Hey, can I go in there and buy an umbrella? Can I check out that kind of stuff? But really, that back end database was also facilitating the whole picking of the umbrella, the shipping of the umbrella, and really, I never had good insight into if those processes were driving and I'm using air quotes here, sluggishness on the application side. Hey, I not looking at it. I kept looking at it from the external customer facing application point of view, not from the database point of view, and how that same database was serving up multiple things. Even if it was accounts payable or AR, it was talking to other systems, other people. And without seeing that context, I was left troubleshooting from one of the numerous applications hitting that database. So again, flipping it from this point of view, again, I may have made a change that was really not external facing at all. So your APM is never going to show you anything. It's not designed to do that, but it's designed to improve some process or procedure behind the scenes. And you're not going to get that visibility until you flip and pivot your monitoring angle to make it database focused or database centric as opposed to application centric. So,
Yep, it's important that we check both of them.
absolutely, because that is how you're going to get a holistic view. I know, you and myself, we've talked to our application people here, and we had an example that the application folks like to say, oh, it was a database issue because I'm waiting X seconds for a query to come back. And we're like, well, why was that query executed a million times at 8 a.m.? Why is it dormant 99.999% of the day? Again, so these things are, you fiddle the database, but I can tell you that it's probably not the root cause of your performance issue.
Yep.
Absolutely. Awesome, John. I thank you for that. I mean, I do think that, while you obviously want to monitor, ensure your code is deploying successful and any changes, I do like that that you've got a run book of every time I deploy code, here are the 4 or 5 things I'm going to check. So I can check off the database is healthy, the database is performant. And then we can obviously, a CI/CD environment, we're on to the next one. And with the frequency that DPM checks things and the data retention and the fact that it's SaaS, you're able to focus on what matters most to you and your development team. You're not having to babysit the monitoring solution, anything along those lines. All right, so why don't you kick it back over? And we've got a bunch of questions that appeared to have come in.
Yeah.
What I will do is also say, if you'd like to learn more, obviously we've got our page on SolarWinds.com. You'll find it under the Database Performance Monitor. You will find a bunch of case studies we've done out there. And we've had case studies where they are code dependent. Hey, I was able to use this in a code deploy method, and I confirm things. I've used DPM in just an optimization that, hey, I'm not really deploying code, or let me rephrase that. I'm needing this to figure out what code to deploy. I'm using this to say, hey, here are the 4 or 5 queries that are performing poorly or, happening numerous times. The counts are through the roof. How can I change my code to reduce that workload? Is it an adding an index or things along those lines? And then obviously the ROI results where, people are, I'm reducing my latency down, I'm reducing troubleshooting time, I'm reducing EC2 instance sizes. There are a number of use cases of how DPM can work with, coexist with your APM solution to help drive better code, more efficient code, better quality code. with that said, I will turn it back over to David so he can MC any questions. Obviously, if you'd like to have more information, if you'd like to get a demo, how can we help you out there? Obviously, with COVID and all of that, we have done a lot of with a lot of online companies that have seen their usage explode. Ordering from home and those Instacarts and all those companies, we're really working with them on helping them, make sure that their infrastructure and their database can handle the load and anything like that. So feel free to check that. With that, I will probably turn it over to David to MC the questions. And I believe there's an Amazon gift card raffle still out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Jared. A really cool demo, John. Thank you so much for that. And now let's kick it off with our first question. Don't forget to get in your questions now. If you have a question in your head, just pop it there in the questions box. So first question that came in here, this one's from Ethan. He's asking, can you monitor Microsoft SQL?
Ha ha, funny you ask. Currently, no. That unfortunately, no. But if you are familiar with SolarWinds and how we really are, we do listen to our community a lot. We've got an online forum called THWAC. There are numerous requests for Microsoft SQL to be added. So this is definitely making its way up the priority list of supported databases. I definitely think the Microsoft angle has kicked into overdrive since SolarWinds has brought this product to market, because SolarWinds is very Microsoft friendly. But unfortunately, no. But I would say pay attention to the message boards, and we will, hopefully be able to fix your problem soon.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I know SolarWinds always listening to customers and innovating, so we appreciate that. Next question comes from, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Abhine, who's asking, how do you decide if a new query is performing well? And also, do you provide suggestions for improvement to resolve issues?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll tackle the second part first. In terms of providing suggestions for improvement, there's a lot of stuff that you can look at within DPM to understand the behavior of a query, and then also to figure out where to go in order to improve its behavior. So first and foremost, taking a look at the explain plan that's available will tell you a lot about whether or not the query is being executed efficiently by the database. Also, those best practices that we touched on, you can see that when you're looking at a query's details, they show up right attached to the samples alongside the explain plan. So if there's anything that DPM is seeing, it says, hey, this is inefficient, you should probably change it, take a second look at it. That'll be included right there along with the rest of the data about those individual query executions. In terms of understanding, is a new query performing well? It really is kind of subjective, right? You've got to ask yourself, is this performance good enough for my application? Is it good enough for my end user? And do I expect things to change significantly over time? So in the example that I showed about identifying a new query that was failing to use an index, I didn't highlight this, but the query itself was not taking a long time to return. The bigger point of concern is it going to stay quick, or is it going to potentially get slower as the table that it's querying is going to grow over time? And so those are kind of the two things to keep in mind when you're looking at new queries. What does the performance look like today, and is it fast enough for my needs? And then two, do I expect the query to stay more or less the same in terms of performance, or is it possible that there's going to be a lot more data that we have to churn through in the future?
Excellent. Yeah. Very good answer. Thank you. And then another question here, they're asking about sensitive data. Can this help in that regard?
Can we help with sensitive data? I guess to answer the question, so DPM is strictly a performance monitoring tool. So we're going to look at the health and performance of your databases and make sure that things are staying efficient. If you have concerns about, my database has sensitive data and I can't have it transmitted to a third party, that's definitely not a problem. We have configuration options available at the collector level to make sure that no sensitive data is going to be captured and transmitted to our platform. So a number of our customers are PCI compliant, HIPAA compliant. The databases that we're monitoring have very sensitive data inside them. We work with them to make sure that none of that information ever leaves their data center.
Nice. Yeah, that's very cool. I know that's got to be important for quite a few companies out there. Next question. uh, they're asking about licensing. What's the licensing model for DPM?
Yeah, so DPM's licensing model is per database instance being monitored. So for each of your MySQL installations or your Postgres systems or each node in your MongoDB replica set, that would constitute a license. And if you've got development systems that you want to monitor, we do typically discount those pretty heavily. So you're going to pay a little bit more for your production systems and for your internal development and staging ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's pretty much standard across, at least the industry as far as database monitoring. So we didn't deviate too far from there.
Yeah.
Great. Great. And before we get too far along here, I want to make sure everyone knows about the trial link that's there in the handouts tab, as well as the other resources. Just a couple of minutes left here to click on those or download those before you go. Next question, they're asking about what's the overhead when it comes to monitoring databases with this tool?
The overhead of monitoring the database with DPM is very low. The way that it works, I don't know that we touched on this in too much detail, but there's a collector agent that you can either install directly on the database server, or you can monitor it remotely. We'll just query the database like any other application. The queries that we run are very lightweight. They add almost no overhead to the system, and the agent itself typically consumes around 1% of total system CPU when we're running alongside the database. So you shouldn't expect to see, any significant performance overhead added from DPM.
Nice. Very nice. And then can you kind of walk us through if we click on the trial link there, sign up for that, what's the next step? How do we gain access to this tool? What might we be able to test out with it?
Yeah, since DPM is a SaaS platform, when you fill out that trial sign up, it's going to take you right into our web portal, and you'll have the instructions for how to set up monitoring on your first database right there on screen. So, regardless of whether you're running a managed database like Amazon RDS or Google Cloud SQL, or if you've got a database that you manage yourself, there are instructions that are available that'll walk through step by step. Here's how to go through and download the agent and set it up with monitoring your system. Once you get the system set up and you're monitoring your first database, it'll take about a minute or so before you start seeing data in the platform. There's no limit to the number of users that you can invite, so you can add your entire development team during trial. We typically have a limit of 20 database instances to start with for a trial, but if you need more than that, that's not a problem. And typically what we'll do on the SolarWinds side is someone will reach out to you after you started your trial, and we'll schedule a meeting to walk through the account with you. So someone like myself or one of my colleagues jump on a call with you. We'll walk through the account, talk about what we're seeing so far, answer any questions that you may have, and make sure you're getting the most value possible out of the trial.
Really getting somebody to start using the product and seeing the data. I mean, obviously I'm not in the sales engineering side, but I've been on enough phone calls to say, hey, when you are looking at your own set of data, things click a lot easier than, John, obviously we've got the demo we can demo with, but when people see server one, database one, or whatever it is, things really click. So, it is in your best interest to, kind of go through those instructions. They're easy and get things monitored again. And it is, as John pointed out, obviously we sort of put a little soft cap on the number of users, but your feature unlocked. So again, you're not going to get in there and go, oh, well, hey, half these tabs are grayed out. I can't see anything. Or, hey, it polls every 10 minutes or an hour or something like that. You really are getting the complete application available to you at that point.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity. I mean, it's a SaaS-based tool. You don't have to install anything on a VM or anything like that. It's all in the cloud. Simply gain access to it with the trial, connect it to your own data, and immediately start seeing the benefits of this tool. So it sounds like a great opportunity for anyone out there who's interested in trying this out. Again, the link is there in the handouts tab at the very top, the free SolarWinds DPM trial. But with that, I think we've run out of time in today's event. Jared or John, any final words, anything to add?
No, I appreciate being here. I really do enjoy working with you guys, and I love hearing from customers that are using the tool or how they would like to use the tool or unique use cases. I mean, John and myself, obviously, hey, these are the ones we're hearing, but it's you always hear something new, some other new use case, how this saves somebody's save something from going down. So we'd love to hear from you guys.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like could be a really eye-opening experience, installing this tool and pointing it to your real world production data set, seeing finding problems quickly and preventing things before they cause trouble. So again, thank you so much, John, for the excellent demo, and thank you, Jared, for the great presentation as well. Thank you to our audience. Before we go, I do want to award the Amazon $300 gift card. That's going to Rob Mance from Utah. Congratulations to Rob Mance from Utah. Thank you to SolarWinds, and thank you to our audience for joining us on the event today. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.